Welcome to our prospective students, both community regional planning and beyond perhaps as well as our existing students and faculty, staff. I'm really excited to introduce our guest speaker, who is just starting to chat. Dr. Dave Niyogi is speaking today on Resilient Cities, Adaptation for Dynamic Sustainable Futures. And this is part of the City Forum speaker series, which is community regional planning's speaker series, which is in addition to all the other programming events that we have here in the School of Architecture. I wanted to give you a little bit of background about Dr. Niyogi first. He's a professor over in the Jackson School of Geosciences, I think with a joint appointment in civil and architectural engineering as well. He's currently leader and also founder, I think, of the UT Extreme Weather and Urban Sustainability Lab. Acronym is Texas, which we love. And he's also the William Stamps Ferris Chair holder in geology. His research seeks to understand and contribute to our understanding of the Earth system, particularly urban agricultural landscapes, and to translate scientific work undertaken into decision tools to create more sustainable, climate-ready, resilient coastal cities and agricultural systems, so very broad in its application, which informed his work as the former Indiana state climatologist. So Dave's been here with us at UT Austin for a few years now and has made such an impact so quickly, both locally with your work with the City of Austin, across the state, globally continuing. He is a very well-known scholar and academic with over 200 peer-reviewed journal articles, 18 book chapters, and over 150 conference proceedings. And I had asked him to come today because we wanted really to invite a speaker for today who could connect to a broad audience. And I've seen Dave speak a number of times now and just does a terrific job. And I just wanted to share a little bit that when my father was ill last spring, he was watching a recording of a panel that you and I did together, and I moderated, and you were on it, and my dad, he's very supportive. He's like, good job, Catherine. And he's like, who's that Dr. Niyogi guy? Tell me about him, because he's an amazing storyteller and really can connect with audiences. So I'm so pleased to host you here today. Thank you so much for coming over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always humbling to come back to these settings, and it makes me even more concerned what you guys would be expecting of me after that kind of introduction. So don't expect much. It's sort of like the weather you're seeing today. It's brilliant. That's what we advertise. It's not what you're going to have, but I really want to appreciate where we are with regards to the whole setting. As I mentioned, the place you are in, the subtle architectural aspects that you see that you don't see across the campus. Those things, the art and so forth, even as you're walking into the building, how inviting it is, and it just feels a little different. These guys are so good, they even managed to crank down the temperature for you by about 10 to 15 degrees. You notice that? How amazing is that? That if a program can actually impact and change weather, how amazing is that the things that you're doing can actually somehow manage to crank that thermostat down. And I'm not kidding. This is exactly one of the things that you can do as a superpower when you have the right set of tools, working with the right set of people, and with the right set of goal. And there's probably one of the most important goals that we have, that the way in which our temperatures have been rising, we'll not talk about why it is rising. It's rising, yeah. The way in which some of our extremes are changing, again, we'll not talk why, but they're changing. The way in which our insurance rates are changing, and we will talk about why, because the extremes are changing. So no matter where you come from, in the context of whether weather is changing, whether things are becoming extreme or not, there's only one tangible proof you need. Look at your insurance costs. How are they changing? Because the insurance company knows something that you and I may not be talking about, that the future is not safer than today. The future is riskier. And that's why your premiums are going up. Yeah? But someone has to make it safer. Someone has to solve the problem. Thank you. I'm looking forward to see how you're going to do that over the next few years. So, as I mentioned, I am going to try and talk about some of the things with regards to the superpower you're going to have. But let's start from the global context. If you look at it in the global sense, several of you might have seen this picture. If not, let me orient you. This is a color-coded, and my apologies if anyone has any difficulty with colors, but essentially you are seeing cooler, bluer colors here, and as you go, you are seeing warming with brighter, warmer colors in more orange on the right. Yeah? More warming. These are called the share your stripes kind of thing. And Brian Hoskin, who is at the UK Met Office, a good friend of mine, he had no idea when he started this kind of graphics, this was going to be so viral. Everyone uses it. And in fact, he now introduces himself. I'm Brian Hoskin. I'm the guy who created the weather stripes or the temperature stripes. So this is one of those things here. How many of you have seen this or some semblance of that? Yeah, so you're aware. Now, this is in the global context. Now, if you bring it down just to the United States, notice how there are differences. How the globe was much cooler, US had some warming, cooling, and if you look at it more recent times, we had more warming and so forth, right? So even when you compare globe versus the US, things are different. They are going to be warmer, cooler, and we can't really say, looking at the globe, that this is what is happening in the US. Nor can you look at the US diagram and say this is what is exactly happening in the global sense. Yeah? Now let's come a little bit closer to Texas, to Austin. And then you'll start seeing that these things are even more different. That, there might be some El Nino, La Nina years, but really, when you come down to local scales, the global picture can give you some idea, but does not really depict the reality in a sense that is accurate. Yeah. So you could say in general that, yeah, Austin is warmed. You can say in general that it is consistent with what we are seeing globally. But you cannot say that this is an exact replica of what is happening globally. All good on that? Yeah. So the point is, for something as simple as temperature, that's the most basic weather parameter, meteorological parameter we know of, right? So something as simple as temperature, even when we go from the global picture to the local picture, we realize we can't really use that as a signature for trying to do things locally. On the other hand, what we really need is that if we are trying to solve city-scale issues, which is where you and I live, we don't live on the planet. We live in our neighborhood. We live in our city. We travel across the city. What happens in the city, the policies in the city, the parking options in the city, they matter to us. Yeah? I mean, we are global citizens, but end of the day, like politics, climate is local. Like politics, everything that we need to solve had to be at a local scale. Yeah? So when we are trying to impact the world, not in the top-down way, but the bottom-up way, we need to understand how our world is evolving. We need to understand how this thing is evolving and changing and what we can do to have a feedback. Everyone with me on that? Are we on the same side of the solution? Yeah, good. So how do we do this? Now, the reason we are doing this is, like, if you just come to places like, I show this for Austin, but you can really have this for almost any place, almost any city. There's an aging infrastructure. There is risk associated with unpredictable growth. Nobody knew about 15 years back that somebody will be coming to Austin and starting to tweet about moving our space stations here, and then the property prices going up. Yeah? And how this has been having an impact in the manner in which the West Coast corporates have been starting to move towards Austin. Yeah, this is a social dynamic. This is an unpredictable aspect of how things have changed. But that has had a direct impact in the manner in which our resources have been stressed now. Austin, as you may recall, I mean, I came here in Austin last time. I mean, one of my earliest visits to Austin was in '94. And I remember that as an easy college town where you could just park anywhere, go eat, listen to some music, and go back to the big city called Houston and be scared of driving there. Yeah, yeah. And so then I came back again after 15 years, and I'm like, what happened here? and then came back again when these guys very kindly invited me to be considered as one of them, as one of the faculty. And I was like, what really happened here? And ever since, I'm asking that question every day, what is happening here? Yeah? So the dynamics with which the weather is changing, the city is changing, the town to city transition has happened, how the cities is sort of like becoming into this mega city mode that is trying to grow, how it is flexing its muscles in terms of the economic power it has, how it is trying to develop some sort of identity, and yet it should not be at the cost of you and I being here. And so how do we actually balance out the resources? How do you do what is often used very often as a smart growth strategy? Yeah, what can you do that you actually let the city grow, but at the same time retain that comfort, the livability that the city has? That has been a challenge for most of the scholars who are trying to look at cities. And we had models like the 10-minute city. You heard of that? 10-minute city, 15-minute city, that everything anywhere should be within 10 minutes. Yeah. I recall 94, my cousin who was here, my uncle, saying that everything here is about within 10 minutes. Now it's like everything is within half an hour. Yeah. That's not what we want to achieve. So that means the city has probably become 3 times worse in 3 decades. And we need to reverse that. So that's just from the context of time. There's also the context of the risk associated with temperature, the energy use, the air quality that you're experiencing, the stress that you have about all that is going on. I mean, be in an environment when there is no trees and see how you feel, and then come to a place where there's beautiful green trees and see how you feel. Yeah? And that stress is the delta stress that you did not plan for. But this is where you have a chance to plan and make it greener, nicer, calmer, better for you. So this is where we are, that we are seeing disruption in services. We are seeing a demand for growth. We are seeing a demand for balancing it with what we can do with regards to where we are. Now, what makes it also interesting is that the things that I talked about, they are differential. If you are one person living in one part of the city, you might experience that more than somebody staying in another and having this oasis of trees around them. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I have these beautiful trees. I'm worried about pollen. Yeah, so it could be a whole different problem. So what it boils down to is that we need to understand vulnerability. Every neighborhood, every individual, every business, every infrastructure might be vulnerable in a different way. And we use this word very often, but in a more quasi-scientific way, we will say that it is a function of 3 things. The first is exposure, meaning what kind of shock are you getting to the system? Is it just a trickle of rain, or is it like you're going to get this torrential thunderstorms, and are you going to get these cyclones hitting every month, and the rain systems are just going to like gush down in the streets? Yeah? So what is the exposure? Second, what is the sensitivity? Is this a street where once the water starts logging, it spills over on the street, and then it has a cascade of effect in terms of the traffic slowing down across I-35, and what was at one point really becomes a citywide issue? Or is this something which is so sensitive that it is attached to your energy supply or a water supply for the city, and if that thing trips off, you now have a cascade of hazards coming up. Lack of energy leads to electricity failure leading to water failure leading to a mini public health crisis, leading to a health aspect, leading to some other things. Yeah? So what is the vulnerability of that particular asset, neighborhood, individual that you're talking about? And the third is, what is adaptive capacity? And by adaptive capacity, meaning that you might have 2 stations which have this kind of a sensitivity, where if that goes offline, it's going to have an impact on my water quality, it's going to have an impact on my hospitalization grid, and so forth. But one of them actually has uninterrupted power supply because they have invested in it, and the other does not. So this one has more adaptive capacity because it has some structure by which they have bolstered this sensitivity. Yeah? So if you don't have the adaptive capacity, if you are sensitive, And if you have the exposure, then you are vulnerable. Yeah. So if you're trying to reduce the vulnerability, you're trying to reduce one of the three, right? And once you achieve that, or reduce the two and expand, increase the adaptive capacity, that will be the way by which you will try to make system much more palatable to the extremes that are going on. Now, here's an example about how vulnerability is distributed for Austin, even from the context of, I should have started my stopwatch. I think I'm, what, 10 minutes into the thing already? Yes, okay, thank you. Thanks. So if you look at it from the vulnerability perspective, you can see how there are parts of the city which are much more, I mean, think about it. Sun looks down, sends the radiation. It is not going to say, this zip code, I'm going to give more energy. This zip code, I'm going to give less energy. It's the same energy, same radiation coming down. It is what happens at the surface determines whether that neighborhood is going to heat up or stay cool. Think about it. It's the same energy. And yet you see there are parts of the city which are going to be much, much warmer than the other parts of the city for the same radiation that is coming down every day, right? And so this is sort of like also something that coincides with Austin's vulnerability. One of our colleague, Patrick Bexler, has this beautiful project called the Austin Area Sustainability Indicators, A2SI, and that's some of the data they have been compiling over years that has been giving us a pulse of the city in terms of how the sustainability is changing, how the vulnerability is changing. And so you're looking at some of those maps from that. And on the left side, you're seeing the actual surface temperature from a satellite called MODIS. It's a satellite on a sensor on a satellite called Terra, which has been there for almost 15 years now, going across the Earth. And just like you might have seen a doctor office, you have that infrared thermometer taking your temperature. It is the same way you're looking down on the Earth with a slightly more expensive thermometer, slightly more precise thermometer, million times better, looking down and giving us a temperature, yeah? And it is that temperature that you're actually seeing on the left side, and it is called the land surface temperature. So it is the temperature of the skin of the city. And just like your temperature tells something about what's happening to you, this temperature tells about what's happening to that neighborhood. So when you have it, quote unquote, above normal, you need to pay attention. When it is normal, have fun. Yeah, that sort of a thing. So how do you solve this? So how do you create these solutions? So when you say this is a problem that we are going to have exposure, you have more sensitivity, and we are talking about rains and so forth. So how do you solve it? One is what we call a global solution, which is called as mitigation. Now, mitigation from the climate perspective is a very specific term. I mean, we use it for things like, risk mitigation, we use it for disaster mitigation. You've used that, right? But from the climate mitigation perspective, when this term is used, it has one and only one meaning, and that is reduction in greenhouse emissions. Mitigation equal to reducing the greenhouse emissions, or if you have greenhouse emissions like carbon dioxide, methane, ozone, etc., you create environment which absorbs and acts as a sink. Trees are a great sink, yeah? Marshlands are great sinks. So they take out the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, hold it. That's called a sink. So that when you hold it, it's not in the atmosphere. And that's how you reduce the greenhouse gases. So when you do that, it's called mitigation. Changing of fossil fuel from, say, coal to a clean, quote unquote, clean energy, and EV, electric or so forth, when that is reducing your carbon emissions, that's mitigation, yeah? That's being done, and the impact of that, you will see is roughly about 100 years or so. Because these greenhouse gases have a very long lifetime. The effect of what we are facing today, it's just like, have you ever sat out in the middle of the night and looked at those beautiful stars and ever wondered, that light I'm seeing came like billion years before, yeah? Have you thought of that? It like feels so amazing, yeah? That this light I'm experiencing, no one has seen. It was probably like, some start of the earth. Some people might have thought there is a earth, a star there, and you are seeing that light. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Same way, thank you, our ancestors. We are experiencing their emissions today. About 100 years back, whatever was emitted, the temperature rise is ours today. So what we are emitting today, 100 years from now, our following generation is going to experience that. So we have to control it, of course, because this is what we need to do to sustain the problem. But the effects we are going to see are 100 years from now, not today. So there's a different way we have to start looking at it, and that is through the process of adaptation. And the process of adaptation is where you start looking at things which are happening now and here. An example of adaptation, if it's raining, what do? Bring an umbrella. That's your personal superpower against global change. Yeah, you got an umbrella. Yeah. In fact, the same umbrella, by the way, is your superpower for heat. It's not the heat so much as the exposure you have to radiation, the lack of shade, which is one of the big issues. We are used to heat. Have you sat in a sauna? You actually might have enjoyed it. It's not like we don't take heat. It is the heat and the radiation together which is the problem. So if you have heat and if you're in the shade, it's somewhat manageable. So one thing you want to tell people and practice yourself, if you can, from this talk and what we have discussed, as our solutions to the community, carry an umbrella. Simple as that. It will reduce your temperatures by 10 to 15 degrees. Can you imagine that? Just carry an umbrella. Carry a hat, carry an umbrella, dress right. We in fact did a study in our group where everyone came dressed up in different colored t-shirt, black, yellow, blue, brown, white, etc. And we had everyone stand by the tower and took the temperature. And as you can imagine, people wearing black had the highest experience of heat. People wearing white or lighter colors had a lesser experience of heat. So the small changes which are in our hands, what we dress, how we hydrate, what do we do in terms of adaptation like umbrella and so forth, create our own shades, these are our solutions. Now, how do you take this knowledge that, hey, rather than me doing it, city, can you do it? Can you increase my shade? Can you somehow make things lighter such that less heat is absorbed? Can you perhaps create more like mist and humidity, not like the deadly humidity, but at least the kind of water bodies and so forth that can help us feel better? These are the things we feel good about. So as a city, we collectively want to feel good. Yeah? So that's our challenge right now, that we know what we want to do. Think about it. There are many, many problems the world is facing today. This could be health related. This could be economic, for which we don't have a solution. We are working on it. And here we are saying this is our biggest problem and we know exactly what we need to do. So what's stopping us? What's stopping us is two things. Scaling. That one tree in your backyard may not cool that whole city, but 1,000 trees in a neighborhood can. So the scaling requires some prioritization and it needs some help. And that's where we are now going to go and move from this mode where we are talking to where you as the solution makers are going to start going to the next step. So cities meet the solution for global change, and that's your community land use and regional planning. That's the secret solution that we have. Yeah? And when you have this, you can change the world, neighborhood at time. And when you change that knowledge, you are indeed changing the world. And so what it takes is just that understanding, that idea, that concept, that this is how you do it. And we are in an era of influencers. You're going to be able to do it much, much, much easier than what the previous generations had been able to do it. Okay? So what do we mean by that? That the global change is the hammer. You may not be able to control that thunderstorm coming your way. You may not be able to control that heat wave coming your way. But you have a chisel in your hand, and that's your land use. How do you deflect the impact of that particular hammer? Where do you want to deflect it? That is your tool. That chisel is your land use. That chisel is your community planning. And that is what you need to develop and create for different cities. And that's what our goal is, that divert or diffuse the impact such that it goes to places within a city where it can be absorbed, to the places that are less vulnerable, to the places which are more adaptive, and then that way you don't see the impact associated with that. We good on that? It's a simple recipe. It is sort of like take an egg, take a pan, break it, heat it, omelette, yeah, miraculously, that way. Now, does city landscape change our weather? Of course it does. Everyone has seen this. We call it the urban heat island. I mean, it's like the most common thing people know. It's like, bread and butter, urban heat island. Everyone should know it, yeah. So this is, for instance, two locations east of Chicago. Indiana, that's where I was for almost 18 years. So to me, that big bad city was Chicago, not Houston, yeah. So if you look at LaPorte, which is about 20 miles from the Midway O'Hare Airport, O'Hare and then Midway, there are two airports. Midway is sort of like at the Chicago south side. And even in that, one was urbanized, one was not, and you can see that the temperatures are about 5 to 7 degrees different, yeah. So this difference in the temperature between urban and non-urban is what we call the urban heat island, yeah. The urban heat island term you can see because actually if you start plotting the data in a satellite imagery, remember that modest Landsat temperature that we are all familiar with now? You can see on the top that white spot is the impervious surface of Atlanta, yeah? And then around it is the green pine trees that are around Atlanta and Southeast. And at the center here, below that, is the corresponding temperatures. So the city of Atlanta is much, much, much warmer, and the region around it is cooler. So it looks like an island, yeah? That's the term. If you go across to other regions, like this is at nighttime in places like Delhi and Ahmedabad in India, and where there is nothing at night and just the city, you can see those islands even more prominently. Those are the hot spots of high temperatures, and hence the term urban heat island. Yep. Now, going forward, when you start thinking, these heat islands don't necessarily just stay hot at the surface. The cities start heating. When the temperature starts increasing, the pressure starts dropping. When the pressure starts dropping, it draws air from the other sides that we call convergence in atmospheric science. So it's like sort of like the sea breeze, when one region is warmer, one region is cooler, you get your winds towards you. That's convergence. When two air masses collide, they don't go poof down, they go up. Fast and Furious, my favorite movie. I love how the cars come and bang into each other, and the fender never goes down. It's like poof, goes up. Yeah, the same way. Visualize that. Two air masses coming, and they're coming towards each other, and they're going to go up. As the air rises up, the moisture that's in the air starts cooling, and as it starts cooling, it reaches what we call a dew point temperature. So that moisture, that humidity that we had in the air is now water particles. Now these water particles, they start playing with all the pollution that's in the city, and they start sticking together. And now you have many water particles sticking and getting together, and they start and rest in a cloud. Now you have this giant balloon sitting over the city, filling up with water, becoming bigger and bigger. And now if you get a storm, there are two things that can happen. One, that storm can blow that balloon or the cloud downwind of the city, but then it is starting to get more agitated, and then it is mixing, and poof, that balloon bursts up and you have water. That's what you call your rain. Or if it is not that windy and the city is very hot, then it can be just over the city. It doesn't even need to be going downwind. Yeah. So this change that you have in terms of what's happening at the surface actually brings in moisture, brings in humidity, starts creating the rain, and then that rain converts into a thunderstorm, and that can be raining over the city or downwind of the city. So now cities are changing what? Two things: temperature, rainfall. And of course, with that is a change in humidity. And with that is a change of winds. Now, when you can change temperature, humidity, rain, what else is left in changing in your climate? So now the question comes up, how should be the scale? I'm going to take you now to Australia. Yeah? You're flying in, on your right side, you see this beautiful field, which was this bare land, which was in harvested wheat. So it is all brown. You see that patch on the right? All brown. And then now you're coming to this reserve forest, all green or moist. What else do you see? Clouds. Where are the clouds? Only over the forest. Why would that be? So land doesn't have water, so you have more evaporation from the forest. And because of that, now you're getting these clouds. Just like what we discussed, that if you have more moisture and a temperature, you're going to change that. Now let's see what happens if you look at it in a satellite imagery. Can you see that? On the left, so what I'm looking at is the satellite looking down, and somewhere here is your bare soil, and here is your forest. Okay, keep that in mind. Are you able to see that? Unless we want to darken it somehow. So look at those clouds that they're forming and see where they stop. They stop right at that boundary, as if they know, I'm not allowed to go there. Yeah, no moisture. Yeah. Now, on the other hand, if you had a sea breeze, the clouds are going to form only over this bare area and do not cross the other side because it's a different environment. Yeah. So the changes, if this was done by humans, this would change how it rains, right? And indeed, this is done by humans because these are protected forests and these are reserved agricultural areas. So you have a changes of where it rains and where you get clouds depending on where you get the winds. There's a beautiful example in case of Hong Kong. You guys been to Hong Kong, anyone? Hong Kong has a slight issue. It doesn't have too much of a space. And it's polluted because there's a lot of building. And so they rely on sea breeze to clean itself up. Yeah? So when they were trying to come up with the airport, airstrip there, as the city was growing, they had a plan that, oh, we are going to put this plane coming in, and this is how we are going to do that. Somebody there said, if we study this, it will see that the manner in which the planes are coming, you're not allowed to have buildings into the plane track, yeah, when you're landing and taking off. So the buildings will go parallel to the airstrip. And if that happens, it's going to block our sea breeze. And if that happens, it's going to make our city more polluted. Aha! So they changed it this way. And now the city has that thing, but it also aids sea breeze. Clear example about how, if you think ahead, if you plan things correctly, you can actually change the weather and climate in the region. Yeah? This is one example of where you're seeing from the satellite imagery. There's another one where a thunderstorm is coming, just stopping there. I mean, it is so fascinating. How does that cloud know? Oops, 3 kilometers down, different land, shouldn't cross over. How beautiful is that? Yeah? And it just shows the connectivity that we have in terms of the land, the atmosphere, the system, and how this is all interrelated. And so you change one, you're going to have a cascading change on something else. So change what you can. It's like that fortune cookie thing, you know, you get that? That's what really this is, yeah? So how should then the cities start exploring this kind of if-then scenarios? That becomes the next question. Great, we can do it. Great, it can be scaled up. If we can scale up, it's going to have an impact. Now tell me how. That's where they come up with. Now, one way is that I can't really do an oops with the city, saying that, oh, let's try it here. Oh, no, it didn't work. So I need to have computational models by which this can be done and show that this could be done. So that's where we go. Now, one good way we do this is by doing video gaming. Ever been to an arcade where you sat on a bike and there's a tree and so forth? So you can create some very realistic cities. And in that, you can create a scenario of where you are with regards to the city, how you are. So look at all the data. You can digitize the data. That's the first thing that happens. Then you can start interfacing with video gaming and say, okay, here's my city. What if I put some, streets? What happens if I start putting some blocks and parcels? What happens if I put some buildings there? And then how it is going to be if I want to create clouds with, say, 0% parks. What happens if I have 15% parks in the city? What happens if I have a 30% parks in the city? What would be the change in temperature? What could be the kind of configuration I can come up with? These are the kind of things, experts here like Catherine and Julian and others are doing, with different models, and you can come up with this if-then scenario. If it looks right on paper, you can then start talking to the city saying that, hey, how about we keep some parks and not keep every street block into a building block there, yeah? Those sorts of things, and show the value. And you can in fact even go and then start doing it in the context that, okay, you know what, let's put some greening and we can have a city, and the city has some lake, and that there could be a water pond, and then that water pond can actually have some nice setup by which the city can be square, the city can be circular, or it can be a tall city, it can be a more neighborhood city where you can have different rules about what could be the kind of land use you want to do, and then you can view it, what could be the shading you get, what could be the winds you get, and so forth. So you start using this computational texting and then start going into the context of what could be the kind of landscapes you can come. And then once you do that, you can then start looking at it, what it would do in terms of where the clouds form, where it could rain, what kind of wind patterns can emerge. And all this can be created as if this is a video game you're playing for the city, or what the future should be, what it looks like, where it could have the options available, and what it could mean in terms of our future. Okay, so I'll then, I can keep playing with this for hours. As you can see, I do that. But this is what we did. You take similar satellite imagery, you take all the data that are available openly now, and this is Chicago, not from a Google Earth, but from a video game sort of setup, the same graphic setup. And this is how Chicago looks when you are looking at it from the video perspective. And what is good about it, you can now query what is the width of the city, what is the height of the city, what is the different data sets that you need for the city, where are the parks, and so forth. And you can then start doing questions like, what could be the road network you have, what could be the buildings you have, what could be the land use you come up with, and so forth. Now, this is one way. This is doing technology. What is that one ingredient missing in all this? Feedback and people. Yeah, this is ideally for stakeholders, this is ideally for individuals and people who have decisions. So if you don't engage them in the process, this is going to be like, this is what you do and walk away. This is not how a good solution will work with it. So there's a term called co-production. That co-production means whoever is our end user, whoever is our stakeholder, we start working together right from the beginning, and we try to solve the problems together. So one such way we have been doing this is through what we call the Uticity Collab, in which we have been, with Catherine, Juliana, several of our faculty here, what we have been doing is working very closely with the city and creating this collaborative. If you go to the CRP webpage, they say what's unique about it, other than being a number 8th program, that Austin is a laboratory. This is our living lab. And in here, you test things, you identify things, and hopefully you're not like sitting in a Petri dish, but you're actually solving things. So that collab is where you are looking at creating this data and merging that data with the experience people have. And when you merge the two together, you have something which can be very powerful. And so for powerful meaning, you can then start getting informed decisions. That decisions are not just based on what somebody is saying loudly, oh, I need a park here. You actually have a choice. You know, I had a very poignant conversation about where should city put bus stops. They had a budget for 7 or 10 or 5, and they had about 50 bus places where they could put a bus stop. And the question comes up, how do you tell a child, we are not going to give you the shade. You can stand in that sun for 1 more year, but this person is going to get that shade. You really, really have to be doing it right. Yeah? And you need to do it in a way that is defended by the data and not just by the whim. And this is where I'm talking about informed decision that you can live with and then make life better for everyone by getting people engaged that we are doing it the fair way. So that's where the engagement starts in, by coming up with an informed decision. One such thing we have created is called the Uticity Globus data, and this is where you have the building height data set for every city across the globe. Every building in every city, you have the data available to you now. Go to this web page, download the data, and if you're doing something, we'll love to see what you're doing with it. Yeah, all open. One of the things we have done is what is known as a thermal scape. And the thermal scape is you can go across the city and see at every 5 feet, every 2 meters, what is the temperature like on average. Which parts of the city are cooler, which parts of the city are warmer, where do you have trees, how could it be different, what it would be if I put some trees, and so on and so forth. So you have this if-then scenarios, and this is actual data for the city in terms of walking through. This is by the UT campus, by the way. So you can see that our speedway near the boats, you've seen that hanging boats, is the hottest spot on the campus. No trees, direct radiation coming in, and completely open sky view factor. Yeah, so maybe if we start putting some net over it and diffuse it, we can reduce the temperature there. CRP experts, please, if you can. Yeah, so that's one example of a thermal scape of a data you can do. By the way, you can do this on your cell phone. Go to tiny URL, Colab Thermal VR, and you can even do it with an Oculus and walk in it and see how it feels. We are trying to see if we can actually experience it. We have not been able to work on that yet. Money, yeah. The other thing we have been doing is smoke and fire. I was amazed that thankfully we don't get those big fires, but the city gets more than 100 to 200 burn calls every day. Every day. There's a small burn going on somewhere, bushfire or a dumpster fire or something. But what happens is that smoke starts coming to you. And so how does that smoke spread? That is something we have been working with the Austin Fire Department and so forth. So you can take a look at that particular thing. There's one very nice one that Juliana and Zoltan, they had been working with what we call the digital twin. And this is a beautiful project about OSTwin or UTwin, where you can go to every building on the campus and see how this particular building will be using energy, what it is doing, and so forth. Yeah, so I see we are almost running out of time. There's one more we had done with cool pavement, which is the engineering solutions available. Where should you be putting the pavements which are cooler? What could be the impact of those pavements? How cool will that be? What we found is daytime, in fact, the cool pavements are hotter. Nighttime, they can be cooler. So it should be carefully placed. Where do you want to put this kind of pavements? In places where people are not there during day and then more at night. So maybe like, residential neighborhoods, etc. One thing I found is that no matter what, the surface is much cooler. And when I see those pets walking in this afternoon, and they're like, so even if 20 degrees cooler for them, let's do it. Yeah. So that's how I look at it. We have been developing this health index, heat index, and this is a very interesting tool that can you develop a Google map that will determine how much heat you will be experiencing going from point A to point B. Right now, you only have it in the context of time, but what if we can do it as exposure with heat? So that's the app we are developing right now on the heat exposure, and that's something that you can do. Then other questions like where do you put trees for the city? This is a tree optimizer. So if you have 1,000 trees available, where in the city will I put it? If I have within a 2-mile buffer. So this is like 18,000 trees across the city, where should I put it, and so forth. Okay, this concept, we are not just restricting to Austin. We have just recently been in an agreement with UNESCO, and UNESCO thinks this is a great model that cities worldwide should try and adopt, and we should learn from other cities and build up from here. So that has been allowing us to creating an international partnership of making local relations, global decisions, and all the data together. One of which we did it in the Paris Olympic. Remember, I don't know if this will work here now, maybe not, but what you should be seeing is something like this. Maybe not, we don't have time to. The thermal scape that you saw, that same thermal scape we created for the Paris Olympic region. Okay, let's try to get out of here. And you can see that if you were actually the runner, this is the path you will see, this is how you're going to feel. And the idea was to try to see, they had a choice. Can they do it 1 hour earlier, 1 hour later? And what will be the exposure the athletes will have? What will be the exposure people will have? And so we were doing those simulations for them and providing this information, again, as part of that UNESCO setup that we're talking about. So to wrap up, I will say there are beautiful, brilliant opportunities that you have through the CRP here and through CRP across the campus with working with several of us. And those include the collab, those include the tools that we are developing, the data sets we are developing, and whatever we are going to create here, you are going to end up being with that superpower of reducing the temperatures, of managing the weather, reducing the risk for the cities, and creating something which is very local, scalable solution for the world ahead. And I look forward to see how you're going to do that, cheer that, participate in that, and whatever way we can. But thank you very much. Okay?